We now want to bring you up to speed with a developing story regarding regulations that have been released by the National Treasury that touch on the Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority. And we want to speak to the chairman who is joining us via phone, Vincent Kimosop. Good afternoon, Vincent.
Afternoon, Abby. How are you?
Fine, thank you. First things first, there's this recent development. Tell us a little bit more about it and what are the implications?
First of all, as you're aware that the Unclaimed Financial Assets law is in force, and currently we have money up to a tune of 6 billion that belongs to Kenyans. And what has been stalling the process of actually final reunification and payment of these funds has been the delay in the finalization of the regulations. So I am happy to report to you that this afternoon the regulations are out.
Yeah.
And the implication is that, one, this will help in standardizing reporting. Number two, this will also help in enhancing enforcement and compliance. And then number three, the most important is that we now have the instruments to pay Kenyans. So I think that is a very good news to Kenyans that their money, particularly those that had been positively identified, they can now be paid their money. That is good news to our people, the Kenyan people.
Very interesting. Perhaps, Vincent, how soon is it likely to become effective?
With the publication of the regulations, I think I can confidently say I know the final phase will not take long, but I think the one I can comfortably say is that we can now pay Kenyans as early as next week.
Wonderful news there. Looking at issues around unclaimed financial assets, Vincent, we've seen over the years institutions holding billions of shillings in trust for different individuals. Perhaps if this law, as you've indicated, becomes effective, what are the greater ramifications on the economy, really?
I think one is we are a country that is a benchmark in the African continent on matters of unclaimed assets. We actually do more than many of the other jurisdictions, so that's number one. Number two is that it's part of the financial sector deepening and particularly enhancing good governance, because most of these funds were subject to attacks and theft, particularly those dormant accounts in banks. So now we have a regime and a legal framework in place that actually obligates any holding institution to declare and actually remit the money to the authority.
Fantastic place to end the conversation. Many thanks. We've been speaking there to Vincent Kimosop, who is the chairman of the Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority, giving us the latest developments around the publications of regulations by the National Treasury that effectively make the laws become effective as of today. We'll continue to update you on that moving forward. And now to some good news for farmers. Small and medium-scale farmers from arid and semi-arid regions have actually received close to 60 billion shillings when it comes to financing to agricultural loans. Here's more on that story as filed by Philip Keitani.
Kenyans in arid and semi-arid regions have over the years struggled to feed their families due to persistent drought, but this might soon be a thing of the past if the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries prudently spend the monies received from the African Development Bank in setting up sustainable irrigation projects in 11 counties.
As you are all aware, agricultural productivity in Kenya is constrained by a number of factors, where over-dependence on rain-fed agriculture is one of them.
The principal objectives of the project is to contribute to poverty eradication by enhancing agricultural productivity, income and food security among beneficiaries in 11 arid and semi-arid counties, namely Machakos, Kitui, Makueni, Tana River, Bomet, Meru, Tharaka Nithi, Nyandarua, Murang'a, Kajiado and Nyeri.
This is the first project to benefit from the non-concessional ADB window after Kenya attained eligibility.
The project will focus on improving high-value crop production, improving access to market, enhancing processing, storage production, and post-harvest handling technologies, market accessibility, nutrition, and capacity building.
What this means is that the government of Kenya will now be able to scale up its investments, undertaking large development programs to spur the economic transformation we are witnessing today.
The project's small-scale irrigation and value addition project will contribute to achievement of core national goals of poverty alleviation and sustainable development, and promoting gender equity and empowering of women through their involvement in project activities. Through the project, about 30,000 households, including 90,000 children, are expected to benefit from improved nutrition. Further, average rural household incomes are also envisaged to rise significantly, thus contributing to eradicating of poverty. Philip Keitan, KTN Business.
Many thanks there, Philip Keitani, for that interesting story. Moving on, the central bank plans to mop up 8 billion shillings in excess liquidity from the money markets as a measure to shield the shilling from further depreciation. The central bank uses term auction deposits and repurchase agreements to absorb excess liquidity, making it expensive to hold dollars. This in turn relieves the shilling from pressure arising from corporate demand for the dollar and manufacturing industry. This comes at a time the weighted average yield on Kenya's 91-day Treasury bill fell to 11.36% in Thursday's auction from 11.702% last week. The central bank sold 5.75 billion shillings worth of the debt, having offered 4 billion shillings and received bids for 13.33 billion shillings. And from that story, we want to get into this interesting conversation around the budget policy statement, which was released earlier on this week by the National Treasury. A lot of issues were highlighted in that particular statement, and we are now joined by two gentlemen, one being Maurice Oduor, who is with us giving us the market update. He is from Saiton Investments, and to my extreme left we have a gentleman who actually wears two hats, Honorable Dennis Waweru. He does sit in the budget committee in Parliament, and he's also the member of Parliament for Dagoretti. Many thanks, gentlemen, for joining us this afternoon. Of course, a Friday, I know a lot of people were caught up in traffic, and I know you made it on time, Mheshimiwa. Yes. Sitting in Parliament and sitting in that budget committee, we've seen for the first time in 13 years, Kenya has revised downwards its budget. And what does this mean? We've seen last financial year, 2015-2016, our budget was standing at 2.2 trillion shillings. In this budget statement, we're seeing it's been revised to about 1.9 trillion shillings. What's happening? Is it that the government has realized it's time to live within our means, or what?
Thank you very much. But I would want, first of all, to state clearly that these are just projections.
Okay.
And of course, what came out this week was just a draft.
Okay.
You know, it has not been subjected to participation, and so as is now is a draft.
Which sort of gives us an indication of what's likely to come out.
Yeah, but
okay.
It's good for Kenyans to understand this is just a draft that has come from the Treasury. Which will be subjected to public participation, and including members of Parliament. We're going to have their inputs considered and incorporated in this document. As you're aware, revenues and expenditure in any financial year, these are just recommendations, and that's why I'm saying they are projections which are subject to change within the financial year.
Yeah.
The impression of 1.9 trillion shillings, I would want to state here that it's actually not 1.9 trillion shillings. It is 1.9 trillion shillings plus the CFS plus the county allocation. So it will still end up in the region of 2.3, 2.2, 2.3. So in the actual sense, it has not come down. And we are going to receive this draft as a budget committee. We are going to subject it to a very vigorous debate. We are going to have our input as a committee. We are also going to go around the country. We are going to come up with a final draft that is going to be tabled in Parliament. Interesting. Yes.
Maurice, from where you sit as an investment analyst, looking at this budget policy statement, as I did mention earlier on, from the statement, what it reads is that the government is set to spend in the financial year of 2016-2017 about 1.9 trillion shillings. Of course, Mheshimiwa has clarified a few things there. But what are your thoughts generally on the government revising downwards the budget?
Yeah, Abi, how we look at it as from the private sector, and especially we look at it from the different sources of funding that the government will use to fund this budget. Yeah. That one should happen in respect for the size. And if the budget is supposed to be funded more so from the revenue collection from the Kenya Revenue Authority, and again part of it will be funded from the local borrowing, also within government again setting aside portions that are supposed to go from the global markets. So we've seen what we went through in the year 2015. So again, expectations for Kenyans, and again most of the investors, how they are looking at it, that the government should somehow like slow down in terms of what they borrow locally, and again we should somehow slow down in terms of what we borrow globally, because you look at currently we accumulate dollar-denominated debts that are somehow more expensive if you look at it now in the terms of the total cost of funding point of view. But again, expectation that we expect to see from the for the budget is that we have to see now money being channeled to key sectors, some of the key sectors that now will trickle down and then Kenyans stand to benefit from that in terms of improving the living standards.
And I think if I may add on to what he has said, yes. and I think coming from the financial sector, which I'm still a participant, yeah. I think they should be, the analysts in any given investment bank or fund management company will be looking at the government deficit and the financing as he has put it. Yeah. I think that the capital markets should be celebrating, because we are talking about less crowding by the government in the financial market, because the local borrowing is coming down from 220 billion shillings to 168 billion shillings. So there will be more cheaper money and more competition for funds, where the government will be looking more outward in terms of borrowing from external sources. And I think that is a very important aspect of this budget of 16-17. And we are going to encourage the government to borrow externally as much as possible. But also another good aspect is when the deficit isn't as big, because, you know, obviously that affects the local market. And so for me, it's a good thing. And also it shows that government is finally heeding to our calls to cut on especially the recurrent expenditure, which we feel we need to do some work there. I also feel we are also getting a bit more realistic in terms of revenue correction, because we have been a bit more ambitious in terms of our projections on what we anticipate to correct within the financial year. But I must also say, again, when we have a BPS and it's tabled in Parliament, it's passed in Parliament, when we have a budget, revenue and expenditure proposals, we should always remember that these are just recommendations going forward, which are subject to changes within the financial year, because we might find performance of absorption in a particular sector isn't as good as we had anticipated before. And I think it's in order for Kenyans to understand, even when, and that is why even the Constitution and the law does allow us to come back and say, look, this sector is not absorbing as much, or the ministry is not absorbing as much money as we had anticipated within the financial year. And so we can actually reallocate these funds to another sector that can be able to stimulate the economy and absorb the money. Like a very good example is 14-15 financial year, we had put in 18 billion shillings for laptops. But within the year, there were issues of procurement processes, and so we could not be able to do that project. Within the same financial year, in the supplementary 2 of 13-14, we were able to reallocate this money to other sectors that could have absorbed that particular amount. And so it's a routine, it's constitutional, and it's even bound to happen even in 16-17 financial year.